Welcome back to the Team to Beat Miami Heat podcast. My name is Amir. Before I get into today's episode, just want to thank everybody for following the podcast on Spotify, and also want to thank everybody for subscribing to the YouTube channel. If you are watching on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. So for today's episode, I want to talk about a new report and rumor that came out saying that the Miami Heat want salary cap flexibility for high-level player amid a quiet free agency offseason. So the Miami Heat largely have been quiet this offseason. And I think Zach Lowe on ESPN recently just said that the Miami Heat and the Milwaukee Bucks have had the worst offseason in the East. And both essentially are not contenders anymore. And the Miami Heat's window to compete for a championship is now over. And we know the Miami Heat have no cap and no real ability to make any moves in the free agency market because they're a first apron team. They only have $7 million before they reach the second apron. They have two, I believe, roster spots, maybe three, depending on the Orlando Robinson situation, which I assume he's going to be all but gone because the Miami Heat just re-signed Thomas Bryant. So the Miami Heat have no cap space, so we knew they weren't going to make a splash in free agency, but we knew that they would have to do this through a trade if they wanted to improve their roster this offseason. And so the Miami Heat, like I said, are $7 million under the second salary cap apron, and they have options to use that money. And they also have the mid-level exception for $5.2 million. So we'll see where they go with that. But again, the Miami Heat have taken their time to make a decision this offseason with the money because they have a bigger picture in mind, apparently. So Barry Jackson, Anthony Chang of the Miami Herald reported the latest, saying there's a reason the Heat hasn't quickly spent that money, according to three people who have had contact with the Heat. Miami wants to maintain flexibility with that space in case an opportunity to add a high-level player becomes available. There have been Heat trade discussions with teams, including one with substantial cap space, though further details are unclear. That's very interesting right there. One of the sources said Miami also wants to see what good players become available in the trade market in the days and weeks ahead. Interesting as well. So, any holding pattern is the byproduct of preferring to leave options open to pursue something meaningful, not a reluctance to spend. Such an opportunity could take a couple days, several weeks to emerge. That's interesting what Barry and Anthony basically said right there, that one, they're waiting to see if any other potential trade targets become available. We already know right now it's most likely Brandon Ingram who's going to be on the trade market. DeJounte now is off the trade market. Mikal Bridges is off the trade market now. Who knows if Trae Young is going to be a part of the Atlanta Hawks fire sale. There's also rumors that Lauri Markkanen could be shopped, but he's going to cost too much, and the Miami Heat simply don't have the draft assets to get a Markkanen, honestly, or even probably a Trae Young, realistically, at this point. But this is the problem with the Miami Heat in the past few seasons anyway. They've been waiting for that next whale and they've been missing out. And even when those whales have said Miami, specifically the Dame situation, only Miami, we couldn't even get a star then, let alone when Mitchell said he would prefer to go to Miami as one of his destinations, along with New York and Brooklyn. And then KD also said a couple years ago, Phoenix or the Heat. We've been tied to these folks. We've been waiting, and that's bit us in the butt. So, and we've never been in position while waiting, like right now, where we had the cap space or the assets or the trade capital or the draft pick, excuse me, to make a trade feasible. Um, but what also struck me as interesting is that the Miami Heat had a conversation with one of those teams that had a lot of cap space. I mentioned in my last video. That must have been the Utah Jazz or the Detroit Pistons, or those are the only two teams that have significant cap space where they can take on a Terry Rozier, who's making 25 next year, and then I think like 26 after that, and then Tyler Hero, who's making 29 million this upcoming season. So those are two teams where we could essentially trade those two big contracts and get nothing really in return. Give us a minimum contract or so they can eat up that space. I don't think they would, but we would have to probably attach a pick in order to do that. And we only have like one draft pick, I believe, like in 2030, that is guaranteed to be ours, unless I think we have that other pick that's lottery protected for next season. And if we don't get into the lottery, then I think that pick goes to the OKC in 2024. So we only have one future pick, it seems like. that we can actually use. And I don't know if we would have to attach that to the Jazz to get rid of Tyler Hero to get that huge cap space relief. But either way, the Miami Heat are trying to be flexible. They're just waiting to see. So I feel like at this point, if we lose Caleb Martin, if we lose Haywood Highsmith, it might take a little while to get a free agent to replace those guys. And again, maybe the Heat are going to try to move Tyler Hero or Terry or Duncan even to get some salary cap relief to get maybe a hypothetical DeMar DeRozan, who's been linked to the Miami Heat in the last few days, even though it's going to be a difficult path to get him. So we'll see what happens, man. We're just on free agency watch, trade watch for the Miami Heat. This Heat team needs to improve the roster. They need to put better players around Jimmy and Bam to help with this most likely last shot to be a contender. Not saying the Heat are a contender, not saying that they don't have a puncher's chance if everybody's healthy, but it's going to be really difficult to get out of the East, especially after all these teams around us have been improving. So we do need to take one more stab at it with Jimmy Butler in this build. If that's the direction, which seems inevitable, we're running it back to the most part. Try to get a Brandon Ingram, try to get a DeMar DeRozan, try to get something where we can have one last shot, but also make sure it's only a 1 year or 2 year deal, essentially, with any of these new players, depending on who the player is, so that we do have some cap space in 2026, 2027, when Luca, De'Aaron Fox, Joel Embiid, and a ton of other players are going to be free agents. So, anyways, let me know what you guys think about this latest rumor and report.